Moms for Liberty really worked miracles.
We have a crisis in America in public education. This is the future of our kids and our country.
You are joyful warriors.
And we are just getting started. Good morning. Welcome to the Fire of Liberty show. I'm Tina Deskovich, CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty. This show, we bring to you joyful warriors from the front line of the culture war in America. We have them all across the country, 320 chapters in 48 states. We have 130,000 active members on the ground. And so this show could go on forever because we have so many strong leaders across the country that we want to showcase and bring you their stories. And today we have Nicolle Young from Placer County, California, the great state of California. We'll still call it a great state, even though you guys struggle there a bit.
It is a great state. I don't know if I would want to live anywhere else, but we're crazy.
It's a beautiful state.
It's beautiful.
I've spent enough time there. We spent a whole summer when the kids were little in LA. My husband was working out there. And so we stayed in a Marriott courtyard the entire summer with an 18-month-old and like a 6-year-old. We had a ball. There's so much to do in California. Everything's free in California, amazingly enough.
Yeah, that was different because our beaches are all free. Like, pretty much everything.
I mean, parks, children's museums. We did stuff every day. Again, young family. And so we didn't have a ton of money and I was home with the kids at the time. And so we were looking for free stuff. And, even Hollywood Boulevard and walking down Rodeo Drive. And every day we just went and did something.
Yeah.
What's the major beach park? Santa Monica Pier. We went down there every day for a week. They play chess underneath the
boardwalk.
Yes. Yeah. And I had one of those pop up in my memories the other day. My son was actually competing in his elementary school chess at the time. And so we went down there. It's mostly homeless people playing chess. They carry around their chess kits and the cement tables. You already know this, but our listeners don't have built-in chessboards and the homeless population sit down there and play chess. And my boys were, we want to play chess. And so we went every day. There was a guy, Mr. Download. He said his name was Download. And Braden, who's now 24, sat there. And I have photos of him day after day going down there with Mr. Download and playing chess underneath the Santa Monica Pier for free.
Yes.
So, we all know nothing in life is free.
We pay exorbitant taxes, but I guess that's what we get in return.
Yeah. So people like me can come visit your state and do all these things for free. So thank you. We had a great summer for free.
happy to oblige.
So you're from Placer County, which is not LA, not the southern part of the state. And so tell us a little bit about you. Anything, personal life, kids, family.
So I'm born and raised in California. I've never lived anywhere else, never lived in a different state. I've always lived in the Central Valley of California. I was raised in Bakersfield, which is the very bottom of the Central Valley. And I live in Placer County now for the last 16 years. That is the tip top of the Central Valley, where there's a lot of agriculture.
Most of us have no idea what the Central Valley means. Okay. So you're around the capital, aren't you?
Yes.
Near Sacramento.
So I'm considered a suburb of Sacramento.
Okay.
And it is a red county in a very blue, Crewellian blue state. And so it's been interesting being that close to the capital. So I have 6 children. I have 6. I have 5 boys, and then my youngest is a girl.
Oh, so, I bet she is. Is she like the princess of the family, or is she tough and rumble because she's got 5 brothers?
She's a little bit of both. She's a little bit of both. She's pretty. She can be pretty aggressive, but she can be very, very girly. So my oldest is 25. He'll be 26 in a few weeks. And then my youngest, my daughter, just turned 11. So I have a nice age span. I've always been a stay-at-home mom. I've never worked outside of the home. And
until
for free, but it does keep me busy. It keeps me busy. That was an adjustment, but it does keep me busy, but it is, it's worth it.
And so you've never had a job outside the home. Education?
Like my education?
Yeah. I'm just trying to get to know you a little better here.
I only did 2 years of community college and I got married. I got married very young. And I did my 2 years of community college and my husband said, let's just get married. And I thought, what a great idea. What?
And how many years have you been married now?
We've been married 20.
Oh my goodness.
7?
I bet he knows.
He does.
There's always one in the relationship.
He's a lot better. He's like, no, our anniversary. Because I said, isn't our anniversary on the 24th? And he goes, no, it's the 25th.
27 years later, you still don't know. It's congratulations.
Thank you.
No small feat in itself.
No, it's not. And it's hard, but it's not now. We've kind of like gotten into our rhythm, but we still do things that surprise one another.
It keeps it fresh.
Yeah.
So
So
great.
yeah, he's super tolerant of me.
So what I thought was interesting when we were chatting earlier is your parents and where you come from.
So yes. So my parents were both teenagers when I was born. And my mom was in high school. She was 16. And my father was 18. And teenagers typically don't make the best parents, but my mom was super engaged and she was a great mother. She is a great mother. And the school, in the 70s, teenage pregnancy was not accepted. It was not a thing. It was not acceptable. They wanted her to drop out or do independent study and not continue and walk across the stage. And that was really important to my grandfather, that my mom get a diploma, an actual high school diploma, and walk across the stage. And so she was able to finish her high school education and walk across the stage. And then she was big and pregnant with me, but she did it.
Good for her.
And so she has always imparted on to us how important education is and how you don't always get it from a school. And she always said when we were younger, I never let school get in the way of education because we're always learning. And so
I love that.
Yeah, she was a smart lady, or she is.
She's
a smart lady. And
someone said to me once when I was much younger, I didn't take school or education seriously. My mother also got pregnant with me in high school. And so I really connected with that story. And although she kept verbally telling me, get your education, you have to get your education, it didn't resonate when I was younger at all. I was very close to becoming a high school dropout myself. And it's, you said that your mom's school said to her they wanted her to finish in another way. And I remember my dean having that conversation with me. I think the exact words were, we don't want your type in our school. You have two choices, adult education, or just becoming a dropout. And my mother, who had a pretty rough upbringing and left to have me, came down to that school and said, oh, you will not. You will not to my daughter. My daughter's finishing high school. And so, there's a fight in these women that, and I think you might have the same type of mom. There's like a fight and they want better for their kids.
Yes.
And so you and I got better. I would say we got better options. And now it sounds to me from getting to know you a little bit that your children have also had even better. And that's like the whole point.
Yes.
And so you have 6 kids.
Yes.
And they are, are you a homeschool mom of 6 kids? Public school, private school?
I have done a myriad of educational types for my kids. I've had them in brick and mortar public schools. I've had them in public charters. We've done private. And now I'm homeschooling my 11-year-old and my 13-year-old. I've homeschooled all of them for certain amounts of time. So they all had that homeschool background. And then whatever suited their needs is where we put them. But probably my favorite, I love homeschooling. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love homeschooling. I feel like you get to know your kids so much better. You get to have conversations with your kids that you probably ordinarily wouldn't have. And then you're learning on your end as well so many things that you have forgotten or that you didn't feel were important at the time. You're relearning them in a different way and through your child's eyes. I think that's just invaluable. But I put my older children in a classical education public charter in our county, and it had just opened when I signed my kids up. I think my oldest son was the 3rd graduating class out of his school. So that was really cool.
So let's break that down a little bit. A lot of people that listen have no idea what a charter school is. They hear those names thrown around. They have no idea if charters are public, how those are funded. It's a little different from state to state too. And then to throw in a classical school, there's a lot of terminology here that some people are listening and they have no idea what we're talking about. So let's go back up. What is a charter school?
So a charter school, it's a public school. It's under the umbrella of a public school district. So they have to, in California, the charter schools have to apply and be approved
by the school district.
By the school district.
And just for those that are listening, this is different from state to state.
Yes.
Some states, they have to be approved at the state level. There's like a state charter review board. Here in Florida, it's very similar. The district has to approve and has some general oversight to make sure they're complying with federal laws and regulations, things of that nature.
So, but they have a lot of autonomy. So this one opened and it was classical education. I had never really heard of that before. And so I did some deep dives. And this particular classical model was called the Thomas Jefferson model of education. And it really imparted personal responsibility, giving back to the community, a strong sense of patriotism. We had 10 core values where the kids had to recite them in the mornings. There was a dress code, uniforms, and there was a certain level of dignity that came along with this school. The children were expected to be respectful. There was a lot of expectations and the bar was set really high for these kids. And I would say 99% of them rose to meet that bar. So classical education focuses on the classics. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of writing. There's not any common core or very little, as much as they can get away with not.
Let's back up for a second with charter schools. So did it cost you and your family any money to send your children to the charter school? Because it's publicly funded, just like the traditional public schools. Did you have to apply for your children to attend this school?
I had to apply just to get on a waiting list. That was it.
Okay.
That was it.
And any qualifications? They have to have a certain GPA or pass a test or anything of that nature?
No. The only thing is I have a son with an IEP. I wasn't sure because the school was so new.
If they would be able to fulfill the services.
Yes. And so that gave me pause.
Well, that's a common complaint. You know, if we're going to look at it across the spectrum here, a lot of teachers union types, public school advocates hate public charter schools. They say that they are destroying education. I adamantly disagree with that. But that's their argument. And they say things like, oh, these charter schools cannot fulfill IEPs and 504s. And for those that don't know what those are, those are by federal law, schools have to provide services for children with special needs. And it's expensive to do that for the school districts, depending on what the needs are of the child. Sometimes it's extra reading help. Sometimes, it's children that are completely disabled and it's all kinds of services. But one of your children needed special services and you weren't sure if this charter was going to be able to provide. Were they able to provide?
We talked, my son was going into the 7th grade at this point, and he's dyslexic and he has dysgraphia. And so they were doing cursive and they were starting to read.
Hold up. They're doing cursive?
They're doing cursive. So they
people are like, oh, of course he was doing cursive if you're over about 30 years old. If you're under 30 years old, this is actually a thing.
Yes.
So they're doing cursive. Does your state curriculum require, state standards require?
No, it does not. It does not. So his self-esteem was already affected, even though we were homeschooling him. He's very bright, super bright kid. I ended up pulling him out and putting him in our brick and mortar public school or down the street because they were not as fast paced as John. I don't know if I can say that.
I don't either. No one's told me you couldn't or could.
It wasn't as fast paced as the charter, and there wasn't as much reading, and he felt very overwhelmed.
Hold on. So you pulled your child out of the public charter and put him in the traditional public because it was slower.
Yeah,
basically,
it was slower. It was slower, and he was more comfortable, and he was able to better succeed at that level.
I think you are a banner for school choice or educational freedom. You have 6 kids, I'm sure, I don't know your kids, but 6 very unique kids, 6 learning styles. You've just said that you've, put them in different types of education. And for me, I know I've even moved them around at different times for different needs. And any good parent should be able to do that.
Yes. And I feel like we often are discounted parents, that we don't know our kids well enough, but I did. And I knew what my son needed, and I knew where he was going to succeed. And
you are the expert of your child.
Yes.
Someone may be trained in educational, we're not going to use the word we were talking about before those with PhDs in education like to throw around big words and act like they know more than anyone about these children. And they may know different methods of teaching and things of that nature, but they don't know your child better than you do.
No. And so now he's in college, he's about to graduate. So what we did for him worked, because I knew him best, and I knew when he was struggling, and I knew that I could help him succeed. And he didn't want to get homeschooled again. And so I had to respect that choice of his. And I felt like the foundation for him was already mildly set, because I know there's such a fleeting time when we have influence over our kids. It's such a fleeting time. And once we get to a certain point, it's their peers. And so let's lay a good foundation. Let's make sure they can have conversations with their parents. My kids tell me everything they think I need to know, which I know is not everything.
You're a smart woman.
And but when they have issues, they know they don't have to face them alone. And that was really important to me. I wanted to keep that communication open with my kids. And I think homeschooling just gave me that freedom, because we could have honest conversations, and they got to see me struggle too. And they got to see, like, oh, mom sometimes drops her basket in a big way. And then we have a conversation about that. And so there's a lot of talking that goes on, and boys don't like doing that.
Oh, I have boys. And it is, here's a disclaimer. When both times I got pregnant, I was like, God, I don't think I can do a 12-year-old girl. Can I just have a boy, please? And so he said, sure. And he gave me 2 boys. It turns out they're a little bit harder, at least and the reason a 12-year-old girl scared me was I was a 12-year-old girl, and I had friends that were 12-year-old girls, and the door slamming and the crying and I hate you and the drama and the emotion. And I just thought, I can't do that. But now I've got these boys that are like, and you have no idea, and they're struggling. My boys both of them have had period of times that they were really, really struggling, and getting that out of them is, I'm like, please cry, slam the door, something, give me something.
Because girls definitely wear their emotions out. I mean, you don't have to ask my daughter how she's feeling. She will just tell you, or you can look at her and know. And my boys, it's a lot different. There's a lot more like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And, are you okay? And you can clearly tell that they're not, and then having to navigate those conversations. But I do think that keeping them home with me when they were younger was instrumental in building that, that type of relationship that we have. And, they were not perfect kids at all. And we caught one of my sons doing something he shouldn't have been doing at 16. And I am fiery. I can get real mad real fast. And my husband had just worked like a 16-hour day, and he was trying to sleep. And I called my husband. I was like, you need to go get your son.
Your son.
Because when he does that, he's not mine. He's yours. That came from your side, not mine. And my husband's like, okay. And my son walked in. He had been at the movies, and he walked in and he looked at me and he started crying, and my husband hugged him. And I thought, no, you're supposed to.
He's in trouble.
You're supposed to come down hard. And he hugged him and he said, we need to talk about this.
Discipline with love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And I thought, oh, I guess this is part of the reason why I married you. Yeah. We balance one another out, where I was like, I don't spank, but I'm about to. And I know you're bigger than me, but I'm about to
get in my family and getting that wooden spoon out.
Yeah, I'm really going to come down hard on you, young man. But, and I think that even though he had consequences he had a lot of consequences. He knew they were coming from a place of love and concern. And so I credit that to my homeschooling, but also with that public charter, and I keep calling it a public charter because I think it's important that
you have to use the word public because
Yes.
not everyone understands that they're public schools.
With the public charter, there was a partnership between the parents, the admin, and the teachers. And I could really compare and contrast because I had a child in a typical public school and there wasn't that partnership. I had to really fight for that, where I didn't have to fight for it with the public charter. And that helped me grow as a parent as well. And I was able to see how amazing these kids, how smart and how capable these children could be that came from very, again, I don't like this word, but diverse backgrounds, because the level of education they received was just as good as a private school. But if you didn't have the money for the private school, you could come here and get a top-notch education. And my oldest, well, I guess the first time I saw this was my oldest son. Their senior year, they had to pick a thesis topic, write it, and defend it in front of a panel.
And this isn't because it's a charter. Now we're going to talk a little bit about classical education.
Right.
That's the curriculum, and this thesis you're about to talk about is all part of this classical curriculum.
Yes.
And I was doing a little research on that when you started telling me about classical schools. There's about 1,000 classical schools now. It's one of the fastest growing types of education across the country. It said about 3/4 of these classical schools are private, but like you're experiencing, these public charters are now starting to launch classical education. We have one here in my county.
Oh, nice.
And I visited when I was on the school board, the visits there. They're cafeteria / auditorium. It's like a multi-purpose. Main general room is Constitution Hall.
Yes.
And all the hallways are named after founding fathers, and just incorporates civics so beautifully in their curriculum. But tell us some more about the benefits that your children saw.
They can so starting in the elementary level, the kids will take Greek and they'll take Latin.
It's amazing in itself. We don't, traditional public schools do not do that.
No. And the reasoning behind it is they learn root words. They learn where the words came from. So they get a good grasp on language. They get a good grasp on what the words mean, why they mean what they mean. And so that also helps them with their comprehension. And I noticed it didn't just help with their comprehension and reading and writing, it helped with math. Their brains seemed to figure things out and look at things a little bit deeper because they've been trained that way. So that was starting off in the elementary and junior high. And they don't do a 6 in California. I don't know if this is everywhere, but in a lot of California schools, we do 6th to 8th grade, and that's called middle school. This public charter did junior high, 7th and 8th, and the 6th grade was still considered elementary, which I think is good because 6th graders are still little. They're not that 7th and 8th graders are the, height of maturity, because they absolutely are not. But there's a big difference between an 11-year-old starting 6th grade and a 14-year-old in 8th grade. There's a huge difference. So that was a difference that I really liked. So they learned in the elementary levels, the Greek and the Latin. They were always reading classics, and they were annotating in the books. So they're writing their notes in the books, which I think while you're reading something and you're having to comprehend it and you're having to actually handwrite it out, you're absorbing that a lot more than if you were looking at something on a screen and then typing something. And so that brain to hand to paper, I think, is invaluable. And that's a skill that our kids are greatly missing out on because of all the computer work that they're doing now. And so the reading of the classics, and they were reading books I had never even heard of, authors I had never even heard of. And I love to read, but I was looking at my son and he's reading authors I had never heard of, classical authors I had never heard of. And he was telling me, Mom, in this book, they're talking about this book, and the authors are kind of talking to one another it was phenomenally amazing that he could recognize that these authors were writing different books, kind of like they were talking to each other, almost in a fight, but not in a fight. Like their perspectives about things were different. And so they were kind of talking at one another. It was very interesting that he could pick that up in his studies. And he was like
what types of, when you say classic books, so the things we're seeing in schools today for maybe older folks that are watching this, they are, I mean, I hate to use the word, but sometimes they're banning classics because they approach subjects that they just don't think are politically correct anymore. A lot of the classical literature, children are never exposed to. They're definitely never exposed to like Western civilization type, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, like all of that is cut out of education now. Children are never exposed to it in a K-12 education in a traditional public school.
And that was a lot of what he was reading. And the premise behind like the real contemporary books they're having kids now is, well, we just want kids to read. But
yeah, they're lowering the standards of the quality of literature. Mm-hmm. They're lowering, I mean, some of it's so bad. It's literally almost like comic books, unfortunately, especially a lot of these like genderqueer and some of these books that are found in all of our schools nowadays in the reddest of counties and the reddest of schools. Are depictions with cartoon drawings. And again, the excuse is we just need to engage kids in something that's interesting so they'll read. Give kids more credit. Like teach them about the beauty of literature, the beauty of the written word from the earliest ages. And that's what classical education is doing.
Yes, it really does. And even now, I think my 11-year-old, he's 13. Got him mixed up.
You have 6 of them.
The 13-year-old started reading the Iliad and the Odyssey on his own because with homeschooling, I try to incorporate as much classical education in it as I can possibly muster. And if he had questions, he asked his older brother who had already read those books. And so it was a lot of, and then they talked about it. The teachers would sit the kids down, they would read these books, and then they would just have an open conversation about what they read. It was called the
Socratic method.
The Socratic method. And I was fascinated. I went and sat in. They encouraged parents to come sit in classes.
Wonderful.
And so I came into his English class and I watched the Socratic method.
The Socratic seminars, I think they call them.
Yes, they're seminars. Yeah. And I just thought, I have to leave after he leaves. I have to, but it was so fascinating to see how these kids, the bar was set so high and they just rose to it.
Of course they did.
And
it's beautiful.
It was really eye-opening to me because I thought any kid can do this. Any kid can do this because there wasn't just reading, memorizing, and regurgitating. Mm-hmm. There was actual comprehension. There was
teaching kids how to think, not what to think. It's totally opposite of what's happening in education today.
Yes.
And so we're going to take a second here. We are going to hear from Patriot Mobile. They are good friends and partners of ours at Moms for Liberty. We've got a message from them. And when we come back, we're going to come back with Nicole from Placer County, California. And we are going to dig into some of the crazy things in California, some of the craziest laws that you've been fighting against. We're going to visit a couple of your state legislators and some good stories there, talk about some school board races in her county, all coming up right after this message from Patriot Mobile.
In 2025, we find ourselves in a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage on all 3 of the major networks, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service, it's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Welcome back to the Fire of Liberty show. I'm Tina Deskovich, CEO and co-founder of Moms for Liberty. We want to thank Patriot Mobile, our sponsor of this episode. Please go to patriotmobile.com/ M4L. And sign up today. You get 1 free month of service, and you're supporting a great company that stands on the same principles that you and I stand for. We have got Nicolle Young here. She's from Placer County, California. She's our chapter chair. She's been the chapter chair there for a very long time. We're going to talk a little bit about her fight there and what it's like. But first, we're going to start off with a little bit about your great home state of California. What's it like to live in California?
Well, it is a beautiful state. It would be considered a nanny state.
A nanny state. What's we all know this, like, no, this shouldn't shock anybody, but craziest law on the books right now.
Well, there's so many. There's just so many, but one that's really silly, and our legislature works full time, which I don't think anybody needs a full-time legislature, but whatever.
They're in session all year?
All year.
Really?
They're in session all year.
Do you know what their salary is?
It's $140,000 a year.
To be a state representative in California. Wow. You hear that, California state reps? I think they make $28,000 a year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, but in California, that would be considered like on the lower end of middle class. It wouldn't, that's
the 140?
Yeah.
Oh, well, nobody can live on 28,000.
No.
But the point is, we're trying to make them be part-time legislators, right. Except they are working more than that.
Right.
And it's a whole nother problem. But 140,000
yeah.
to be a California state rep is crazy.
So they introduce silly bills all the time because they have a minimum. They have to introduce a certain amount every session.
They have a minimum?
They have a minimum.
In Florida, we have a maximum. I'm seeing a lot of differences. Yeah. I mean, we already know.
Yeah.
We know that Florida is the great free state, yes. Even though your good buddy, Mr. Newsom there, what did he call California?
California's the freedom state. Like, maybe we're living in different Californias there, Gabby. But one of them that's just so silly, it's so stupid, is you can't work on your cars on this if they're parked in front of your house. It has to be in your driveway.
That's your HOA?
No. That's state law.
No.
Yes, it is state law. So like if my son wanted to change his brakes or change his oil.
Even in like a rural crazy part of California, like by law, I mean, not that they wouldn't maybe get away with it because nobody would care, but
right.
By law, they can't park out in the street and work on their car.
And they're counting on your neighbors to like.
There's a lot of rednecks in Florida that really wouldn't fly
There's
away.
a lot of rednecks in California that don't. I'm from Bakersfield, and the name, the people sound like the name, which I love. I love you, Bakersfield. But they're counting on your neighbors to tell on you, just like we have no burn days in California during the winter. If the air quality drops.
That makes sense. I mean, the California wildfires. I'm going to defend Mr. Newsom on that one, Governor Newsom on that one.
This is during the winter, and you no burn, like a fire in your fireplace.
Or, in your home.
Yeah, or in your wood burning stove.
You can't have a fire in your home in a fireplace?
Correct. If it's
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Okay.
If it is a no burn day, and you have to check. And again, they're counting on your neighbors to tell on you. And which is just ridiculous. It is just the silliest thing. And anyway, so those are two really silly laws.
Worst education law that's currently in place.
Education law that's currently in place. Oh gosh, so we have comprehensive sex education in every subject. We have.
Is that mandated by law, or that's
mandated by law? We also have a law.
No. We're going to talk about that one for a second. So comprehensive sex ed, for those that aren't aware, this is how I like to describe it to people. It is not the film strips when we were kids that talk about boys and girls and the body parts and what happens biologically. Comprehensive sex ed is from actually pre-K to 12.
Yes.
And it infuses gender ideology from pre-K to 12, which means at the end of second grade in the standards, it is written that your child will understand and can identify the fact that they could be a boy or a girl, neither or both. And there's many, many more egregical things in comprehensive sex ed, but that's, to me, those are some of the glaring things that make it completely different than the biological things we used to learn about sex ed. And so how do they infuse, when you say that, how do they infuse that in history? How do they infuse math? You're telling me? Like, I don't understand.
So math, it's a little bit different.
Word problems.
Yes. So, Charlie, who's a he, him.
Yeah. I get it.
That kind of thing. And so like in history and at the elementary, you'll get a section on, oh, here's this great scientist. This scientist was transgender. That is not relevant to whatever this person did for science. And was it so great they needed to be added to a history book? And was them being transgender so relevant that it needed to be included in this lesson? Harvey Milk. I have a big problem with Harvey Milk and them teaching about his life to the kids, because at the end of the day, Harvey Milk had pedophilia tendencies. He started a relationship with a 17-year-old boy when he was in his 30s. And that boy, I can't remember how long they were in a relationship, and the boy ended up ending his life. Not exactly a stellar person. And I just don't think kids need to have that person's sexuality crammed down their throat before they even understand what any of that means. But it's a process that is numbing our kids. It's numbing their senses, and it's making that a very important factor in identifying people. Instead of just looking at someone and giving them respect because they're a human being, they're going to treat them differently based off their sexuality. Or, it's kind of like the DEI stuff. They're going to we all just want to be treated with basic human dignity and respect. You don't want to be treated differently because
judge people on the content of their character, not only not the color of their skin, but not their sexuality, not any of these things. Because none of these traits that are outside of your character and who you are and the choices you make.
Because you're not a good person because you're transgender or you're homosexual or what have you. You're a good person because you're a good person.
Yeah.
And you're an accomplished person, not because you got a hand up because you happen to be brown or black or what have you. You're smart and you achieved that goal. So, but comprehensive sex education infuses that sexuality aspect into everything.
You would think every parent in California would be rising up over this. How long have you guys had comprehensive sex ed in all of the?
The big fight was 2019. And that was when there was a mass exodus from the public school system, was 2019.
Because of this, over this. But they pushed it anyway, and it has stood firm in the school system. And so you guys have been in California, and especially, I guess, because you're so close to the Capitol, you guys have been really active, I would say, at your state Capitol, even though you're still working on forming the statewide legislative committee. You guys have kind of just always been drawn there. It's an easy drive for you. I guess that helps too. What are some of the things that you have engaged in on the state level since forming your Moms for Liberty chapter in 21?
So there's been a lot.
Well, maybe I'll rephrase that. What are, since you're California, we'll start with, what have been some of the biggest losses for you? Because I'm sure when we will get to wins, if there were any, but we'll start with the losses.
So one of the biggest losses was AB 1955. That was a big blow. We had been working really hard to get parental notification in school boards as a school board policy. And parental notification, we have a secrecy policy written into our board policies for California. We have an administrative regulation that directs how that's supposed to be carried out. Most school board trustees are very aware of this. There's also secret transition plans that a lot of schools have, and that's kept in a file separate from the kids' official file, which is a FERPA violation, and everybody knows it. And when I say everybody, the people in charge know it, and they do it anyway. So we were getting very successful throughout the state with implementing notification policies and eliminating that board policy and that AR, and an AR administration regulation, which is what carries out, gives staff direction on how to carry out that board policy. For those who don't, I forget, not everyone knows the lingo.
Yeah.
So we were getting successful. And when I say we, I mean all different groups of parent
activists across the state are making sure their districts are.
And we had coalitions building from this. There was quite a momentum. Now, anytime there is a momentum like this, the state gets scared. They get very scared because they're losing power. Mm-hmm. So There is something that we do in California called a gut and amend, which where there is a bill that's already written, it's already passed through committee. The bill author can pull the contents of the bill, put something new in, and then it doesn't have to go through committees again.
What? How is that fair?
It's not, but it happens a lot. So Assemblyman Chris Ward pulled a gut and amend on one of his bills that had already passed through the committee.
You can just change it and stay on topic. You can put anything you want.
You can put anything you want.
That's unacceptable.
And it happens all the time. When you have a supermajority, you can do whatever you want. There is nobody to hold you accountable. So Assemblyman Chris Ward pulled the contents of a bill and put in that you no longer can write policies that include parental notification. There is a way around it. There's been a few boards that have had to change the wording of their notification policies.
This bill passed and was signed?
Oh, yeah. Oh, with great fanfare. Oh.
And what was that like for you with the bill signing, like the day it's happening?
Awful. It was terrible. And my vice chair and I were in the gallery up watching the signing. And
you attended the signing?
Oh, yeah. Or it wasn't the signing. It was the passing. It was the final vote.
You knew it was going to pass?
Oh, yeah. And the governor had already said he was going to sign it. What?
Why attend if you know it's going to pass? You know, you're probably, are you outnumbered in the room?
Oh, we're totally outnumbered. I want them to know they're not operating in the shadows.
Are you in Moms for Liberty shirts when you're there to watch
most of the time? Yeah.
Just wondering.
Yeah, most of the time. And they know, by now they know who I am, who my little crew is, because again, coalition building, super, super important when you're doing anything
in a blue state.
Yeah. In a blue state is building coalitions, and you make a lot of friends, and the term, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, really takes on a whole new meaning. But, and we all have different strengths, and we all have different areas where we focus on. But I was there at that at the final vote, and Chris Ward stood up and gave some tearful admission about how hard it is to be a queer child. And they voted, and everybody, the Republicans all voted no, the Democrats all voted yes, even though it really didn't have anything to do, because it kept calling it they were eliminating an outing policy, and nothing to do with outing a kid about their sexuality. It was, you can't change your official records without your parents knowing. That was
a parental rights policy. Yes. Is what it was.
And that was the gist of it, was we need to know if our kid's official record is getting changed, and we need to have access to it. Well, Chris Ward, that's another thing they do. They flip the language around.
Always.
And it's that thing, if you say something enough times, it becomes true. They really believe in their hearts. I think that's what these things are. So he, and he was up there crying and thanking everybody. Well, the whole Democrat caucus gets up and stands with him and is hugging him, and they take this big picture. And I thought, well, that was super weird.
It's a way to show their virtue.
Well,
they are caring, loving people that are, showing their love by voting.
They looked up at us, and I thought, oh, they're letting us know they're in charge, not us. This was a power move. And so we got up and we got up and left after that. It was very disappointing because it was one of those statewide movements that was gaining so much momentum, because it truly comes down to things not being a partisan issue until somebody makes it such. Mm-hmm. But it was Democrat parents going, wait, we need to know these things too. And
parental rights is a nonpartisan issue.
Completely nonpartisan.
The upbringing of your child, every parent should want that.
And there was a few extremist parents who said, no, we want our kids to not tell us things. And I said, those bad parents that these schools and these legislators are talking about, those bad parents are you. They're lumping us all in together. They're not going to ask the kid their parents' voter affiliation before they do something egregious to that child. they're not going to ask, is your mom or dad a Democrat or a Republican?
You're not just stripping me of my rights. You're stripping yourself of your own rights.
Yes.
And there may be a time that becomes a problem for
Yes.
you. They're not seeing that.
Yes. And they're not, because they're in their head, it's us against them, or them against us. And so there was a lot of people who reached across the aisle to support this movement. And again, that's where the coalitions were built. And in California, though, crossing the aisle and linking arms with other parents is so important, because it's we the people. It's not I the government, it's we the people. And that reinforces that, because California wants you to think it's I the government. And when they see we the people rising up, it is very scary to them. Very scary.
So you were telling those of us in the office a little story before this started today of an experience you had approaching one of your elected state representatives on a bill that you were concerned about. And I think folks at home might want to hear.
So we have a state senator, Scott Wiener, and he represents San Francisco, the Tenderloin.
Is he still a state senator?
Yeah, he's very powerful.
I remember him making headlines a lot during the COVID era.
Yes.
Some terrible things he was sponsoring it early on in our days. I remember talking to you even back then, or seeing messages from you about some of the horrible parental rights violations in his bills.
And he is incredibly powerful. He's probably the most powerful legislator in California.
Really?
And and he writes a lot of anti-parent legislation. For a man with no children, he's very invested in California children. That's a whole nother can of worms we could get into.
Sounds like he's very invested in destroying families. If it's anti-parent.
Yes.
And
so he had authored a bill 5-6 years ago that you didn't have to register as a sex offender if there was not more than 10 years between the age of the child and the sex offender.
So 14-year-old and 26-year-old.
If it was 24, if it was 14 and 24,
got it.
It was fine.
Okay.
25, you've crossed a line, evidently. 24, you're still good. So this was during COVID, and
13 and 23.
Yes.
12 and 22.
Yes.
11.
And 21. Yes. So, and his reasoning was that it targeted homosexuals. I don't know how.
Oh, good grief.
It didn't make any sense. And that's always...
How many of your gay and lesbian friends would be offended by that?
Every single one of them.
Mine too.
Every single one of them. Mm-hmm. And that's another... all my gay and lesbian friends can't stand this man, because he gives them... He uses them as an umbrella and gives them a bad name. And it pushes gay rights back. So
you were fighting, rightly so, against this bill, and
so I wanted to talk to him. I saw him, and he was walking up to the Capitol. So the Capitol during COVID was they put up chain link fence around it, and there was
because it kept COVID germs out.
Yes, it was very smart, very sciencey, and so they chain linked They had the chain link around the perimeter of the Capitol, and then there was one way in and one way out. And our members had to walk through the same way we did as peons. And
doesn't that bring everybody closer together? I'm sorry.
So I'm standing out there waiting
More
to get
COVID
in.
logic, but sorry, keep going. I'm sorry.
So I'm standing out there, and they had the gates padlocked, and you had to wait for the CHP to come out and open the gate for you to get in. They were
CHP.
California Highway Patrol. Sorry, non-Californians. So Chips, Eric Estrada. He was there. No. So, and they only let one member of the public in at a time. And it was a very long, drawn out process. It was so ridiculous. So I'm waiting there. I have my 5-year-old daughter. She's got her little pink blankie. And I see Scott coming out of the Capitol garage. And I run up to him. Senator Wiener, I just have a couple questions about that bill you just wrote. And he puts his hand out and he goes, stop. Don't come near me, because I wasn't wearing a mask.
You're outside though.
Yes, but it's still danger, Will Roberts, danger. So stop. Don't come near me. And I said, okay. I just, I have a few questions. And he goes, I'm not talking to you. I don't want to talk to you. And I said, but that bill affects me. It affects my daughter. She's just standing there with her blankie, and he goes, "You stay away from me." And he throws his briefcase over the fence and then scales the fence and takes off running.
To get away from you.
To get away from me.
And your 5-year-old in her pink blankie.
Yeah, and I was like, this is the weirdest thing.
Really? I mean, like climbing?
Yeah, he's just like scaling it in his suit and his wingtips. He's a really sharp dresser.
Oh my gosh.
But he's scaling the fence, and I'm just thinking, this is so weird. I'm not a very formidable figure here. I'm 5 feet tall. Like, I've got a
5 feet tall and a 5-year-old little daughter.
Yeah, I've got
he's
a toddler.
so afraid of you that he has to scale the fence.
That's how he will not have contact with the public at all.
It's terrible.
And unless you're a huge donor, then he doesn't mind talking to you. But, just a mom, he's not talking to us. So he crafts a lot of legislation that negatively affects parents. And there's no other way to put it. And he doesn't like women. And I say this all the time. He hates us. And the only people he hates more than the parents are the kids. And he's not a good person.
It's so sad to have people like that having authority over the rules and policies that you have to live by. So any wins? I mean, it's hard to win in California, but have you had any legislative state level type wins that you have?
So again, this is where the coalitions come in that are very important. We have. So we did defeat a Scott Wiener special. Which
what?
A Scott Wiener special. We call a lot of his bills Scott Wiener specials because they just stand alone. They're in a class all of its own. But this was during the pandemic. There was a slow uptake in vaccines, the COVID vaccine for children. So in order to increase this uptake, Scott was going to remove all barriers, which meant kids could go get COVID vaccination without parental notice or permission. They could just,
good grief,
which
another attack on parental rights.
Correct. And that was defeated. And that was a big effort in fighting against that. And my representative from Placer County was instrumental with the help of a lot of us parents in fighting that. And they're both trained attorneys. So Scott Wiener is an attorney and our representative was an attorney, and watching their back and forth was beautiful because you
finally had a voice.
Yes. And he didn't give up. Our rep did not give up. Because a lot of the time they will browbeat the Republicans into silence. And our particular rep was not going to do that. He was like a dog with a bone. And I really have a lot of loyalty to him, even though he's in Congress now and he does some things that maybe I don't like. But I'm still like, okay, give you a little bit of grace because you really had our back when no one else did. And then another one, and for some reason, because California, so a lot of these bills that we have fought really hard against are vaccine bills. And it's not because we're anti-vax. I believe that everybody should get whatever vaccines they want to. We live in America. We have that choice. But you should also be able to turn them down if you don't want them, or if you have a medical reason to not get that. And that's a conversation you need to be having with your medical provider. We don't have that option in California. We have no functional exemptions whatsoever. We don't have medical exemptions. We don't have personal belief exemptions. So when they do things like mandate the COVID vaccine, it's get it or you're kicked out of the club. You're kicked out of society.
So is the COVID vaccine mandated in California?
It was, but the governor issued a mandate, but then he received so much flack for it, he pulled it.
Okay. So there are people that I'm not going to ask you your vaccine status, but there's people that that aren't vaccinated in California because it was rescinded. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, lots. But it was life in California, if you did not get the COVID vaccine, was very difficult. It was very difficult. There was a select few who stood up against it, and there was a select few who honored your choice, but that was not typically the norm. the other one was written by Assemblywoman Cecilia Aguilar Curry, and
this is another win you're going to talk
yes,
about.
This is another
so you've
win.
got two.
So I have two. And she wanted to put the HPV vaccine as part of the required schedule for school attendance. And that should definitely, that's one of those, because it's a sexually transmitted disease, that's one of those vaccines that parents should be making that decision with their child. And if it's not in their religious or moral or ethical belief system, they shouldn't have to do it. And if you're going to school and getting an STD, we've got bigger problems on our hands. And that was defeated again. There was another large advocacy group in California, and they've done a lot of great things, but they hired a lobbyist. And the lobbyist came in, and there was a couple lobbyists that—
You've got to have money. You've got to
Yes.
have money to fight these things.
Mm-hmm.
We've learned that along the way in our last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start. I want to, as we close this down, we've got about 10 more minutes here. I'm going to talk a little bit about your chapter.
Okay.
You were one of the first chapters to launch early in 2021, mid 2021, and you're still a chapter chair
Yes.
in your county. And a lot of our early we've got a few that are still standing strong, but a lot of them it's turned over.
Mm-hmm.
They've passed the baton, rightly so. This is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you still, and I mean this in a grateful way, but how and why? It's a volunteer position. You've never worked outside the home. I can't even imagine the hours you've been putting in the last 4.5 years. Why are you doing this?
If I don't do it, who else is going to do it?
Gosh, it seems like every week that's what was said last week and the week before. Like you take a lay of the land and you think no one else is doing this.
Yeah.
What is happening?
And I think because I always say, like, my term is up. Who wants to vote me out? And I feel like I've been doing this for so long, and I think it's overwhelming to a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's overwhelming to me. I'm still learning. I've never stopped learning. I've never stopped learning about how the school board process works, what the legislation, how it affects us, anything that has to—
What did you know before this?
Nothing.
Did you know your school board members?
No.
Did you know your state legislators?
No.
Did you know who your governor was?
I knew who my governor was. And
Yeah.
I knew here and there, I kind of knew who my reps were, but—
Did you vote?
I always voted.
Okay.
I would be what would be considered a super voter. I always voted. I always took voting very seriously. I took my civic duty very seriously. We have a school board trustee that did some great things within opening schools and getting masks off our kids. And I voted for her because she was a fitness instructor at my gym. And I recognized the name.
Yeah. I think unfortunately that's why a lot of people vote
Yeah.
for those types of things.
And
they like the sound of the name.
Yes.
Half of my heritage is Polish. I know people in my family that would just look for Polish names, on ballots. It's just people vote sometimes for the strangest things.
And it ended up being a great vote. I don't regret that vote, but I didn't research.
You had no idea where she stood on policies that actually would impact your children.
No.
And so you've come a long way.
A long way.
4.5 years.
Now, what I did research was the propositions and like the tax increases and things like that, because I felt like, well, that impacts my life on a day-to-day basis. What I didn't understand is politics impacts your life whether you want it to or not.
Yeah. I don't do politics. Just doesn't cut it.
Yeah. And especially in these deep blue states like California, you have to be paying attention. You have to be researching your candidates. You have to be seeing where they stand and down to the dog catcher, because they're not going to stay on the, mosquito board.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to move up, or they're going to go into different areas of politics. And so you have to know where they stand, and you have to know who they are as a person a lot of the time. And building relationships is super important. And, in California, especially being in the homeschool community, a lot of the homeschoolers like, well, this doesn't affect me, until it does.
They're very isolated homeschool parents sometimes. Families.
Until it does. And then, right now we have a bill, AB 84, written by Assemblyman Al Marasucci, where this bill would eliminate public charters like the one my children were so successful in, and non-seat-based charters, which a lot of homeschool parents use in addition to their homeschooling. It pays for tutoring. It pays for extracurriculars. We have a lot of special needs kids whose needs aren't being met in a typical public school setting, and they get services through this non-seat-based charter.
Is that going to pass?
It passed through its House of Origin. It'll have a harder time on the Senate side because there's already a bill kind of concerning charter schools, because every year the legislators like to chip away at that.
Yeah.
And it will really hurt. It'll eliminate an entire economy, like an entire system of business. The vendors, the tutors. Yeah, it'll do away with all of them, but it'll have a tougher time on the Senate side because there's a Senate bill that tightens up some regulations on charters and non-seat-based charters. But the thing with the government is if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. So if this bill passes, it'll affect this today. Tomorrow, our ability to privately homeschool our children will be gone. And I looked at my girlfriend and I said, the government giveth and the government taketh.
Yeah, that's a good rule to live by.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about one more big, culminating win from your chapter early on, which I thought was amazing. I still remember making the graphic. You guys got behind a ton of school board candidates in your county before Moms for Liberty had any tools or resources.
Right.
You may have been one of the first to come out the gate and say, "Oh, we endorsed all these people." Yes. And I remember with Marie, we were like, what do you mean you endorsed? Who are they? How did you know how to endorse? Who did you endorse? What are they doing out there in Placer County?" And then we decided, well, let's just get on board here and support them and figure out how we can help them. And, since then we've created all these tools and resources, but this was the first year Moms for Liberty ever endorsed in candidates, 2022. Yeah. And I would say you guys probably pushed that envelope and made us do that.
Yeah.
Did it. That we had to catch up with you guys. You ended up endorsing 24 candidates in Placer County for the 2022 school board election. And how many of those candidates won?
21.
Remarkable. That's a massive win rate.
Was huge. And we did not know what we were doing. We had no idea what we were doing. We were just asking parents, do you have good organizational skills? How good are you at calling and asking people for money? Are you good with numbers? Because we need a treasurer for this particular candidate. And we had our own questionnaire we asked people. We just kind of created what we felt like was important for our community because, again, there was nothing. It's not like the system we have now where there's a method. I can't remember who said it and where I heard it, but it might have been at Summit. Somebody said we were building the plane as we were flying it.
That's Moms for Liberty completely. Every time we turned early in Moms for Liberty, we were just adding on a plane part.
Yeah, we were flying by the seat of our pants. Yeah. My vice chair and I and this little team we did not know what we were doing. Parents were angry. We had started going to school board meetings. We saw what was going on. And so the parents decided. It was a total parent uprising. Our rep called it the year of the parent because
we called it the year of the parent. Yeah. We had the shirts and everything that said the year of the parent 2022 because it was crazy what was going on.
It was wild. And I did not think we were going to be successful at all. The election night, I went out of town. I wasn't going to watch the results. I wasn't going to pay attention. My vice chair is sending me texts. We're in the lead for this board. We're in the lead for this candidate. We've swept this one. And I was like, absolutely not. There's no way. It was a surreal experience because we literally had no idea what we were doing. And now we've refined our approach a lot more. We woke up a sleeping giant. We woke up the unions, and they have come at us hard.
That's what happened. So across the nation that year, we ended up winning, I think, 275 school board seats in that year. when we had no idea what we were doing. I knew what running a school board campaign was like, and so did Tiffany, and so did Marie, because we'd been involved in that. We hadn't imparted that information on any of you guys. We created no tools, no resources, but everybody was fired up enough. They wanted those school board members out and new ones in. And so the endorsements were coming. You guys were just emailing us. We've endorsed Joe. We've endorsed Susie. We've endorsed Mark and Jesse. And we're like, okay, add it to the spreadsheet. Add it to the spreadsheet. No idea if Joe or Susie or Mark, like what they stood for, trusting that you guys knew what you were doing. But now you're telling me you didn't know what you were doing. And then the media is calling us, how many wins do you have here? How many wins do you have there? And the Washington Post, New York Times, they were all calling, wanting to know our results. And I'm like, Marie, because Marie was keeping the spreadsheet, and she's like, I don't know. They keep coming in. And so we're given numbers. And then, the media starts really scrutinizing. Well, you said 26 here, not 25. Where's the names? We want to see the names. And then I learned so much. In Pennsylvania, we won a bunch that year too. And you can cross file in Pennsylvania, Democrat and a Republican. You can run as both. And so we were like, they were turning it in saying Democrat. So I remember telling, I think the Washington Post, that three Democrats we endorsed. And so then they came back and they're like, no, they cross-filed. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And so we had so much we had to learn, but you were part of that initial wave of we're taking back our school boards. And I hope America doesn't let that go. It seems like it's dying out a little. People are going back to their normal lives, but those school board seats are still just as important as in 2019 as they were in 2020, 2022, and today.
And I do think it is the most important office you can hold.
Yes.
Because they have the ability to change a generation of minds. They can shape, they hold the keys to the kingdom. And that's what I think it's a little overwhelming for some people. Because we've just, like the president of the PTO in one of the high schools, I was like, how do you feel about running for school board? She's like, I can't do it. I was thinking, well, yes, you can. But it is, I think it's overwhelming because it is a huge sense of responsibility. And people always say like, oh, it's just the school board, but it's so much more than that, because so much comes through our schools that shapes our future, that shapes this next generation. And if we relinquish that control, we've lost this younger generation.
If parents aren't running and sitting on school boards right now, the teachers unions are filling those seats, hands down, 100%, because they have been doing this for decades and they've been trying to put their members on school boards, which is the most unfair thing that can happen. You now have teachers union previous members from 2 weeks ago negotiating with the head of the teachers union on their salary, for instance, like that you're negotiating with each other. Complete conflict of interest. And those contracts nowadays aren't just money. They are when school starts, when school stops, when, the hours, the times, breaks, days off, holidays celebrated, all of those things are driven by the teachers union contracts. Parents must be on the other side of that negotiating table. And the only way to do that is to run for school board. And so we are going to close out on this like strong message of run for school board. You can do it. If you're a parent and you care, you can run for school board. School boards need a variety of skills and talents. The best school boards have an engineer, a mom, a teacher potentially, but just one, a this, a that. Like school boards should be a variety of backgrounds and personalities for the best results for children. And you don't have to be this polished politician. You can be a stay-at-home mom who has done nothing in the last 20 years but bake cookies, but you get in that seat and you're equipped with what you need to know, because I'm going to get a little religious. God calls the equipped and he gives you everything you need. If you're meant to be in that position, you're going to be there and you're going to fill that role seamlessly. And we at Moms for Liberty are going to help you. Yes. Every step of the way. Reach out to us, momsforliberty.org. We have a campaign toolkit now to teach you to run. Everything you need is in there. We have a political director that can help guide you through some of this. We have chapters all across the country, which will endorse you and support you. They can, outside of Moms for Liberty, volunteer for your campaign and knock doors and make calls. What you need is all either in you, God provided it to you, or Moms for Liberty is going to support you in doing this. That campaign toolkit is fabulous. Thank you. And we have used it. We used it all last cycle. I was blowing up
the director's phone. I said, "It's me again." She goes, "Okay, who's me?" I go, "Come on. I've been calling you for like 3 weeks nonstop, probably every day." But having those resources made it a lot easier this go round, because we had on paper what their campaign promises were and where they stood. And that's really important, because then you can go back and say, and building those relationships and being able to have those conversations with the potential candidates or the school board and then when they win their seat, the school board trustees, you have that foundation built, and they know you know how to get resources for them if they need them.
And good plug for our campaign toolkit, our winning workshops, and all the support that we will give candidates that want to run for school board. So last question to close this out. Your why?
My why? Well, it's my kids. And I know that's a super generic.
It's a great answer. It's a perfect answer.
But, we can't put our kids on the front lines and think that they can fight these battles. We have to be the ones standing in the gap, taking the arrows for the kids. And we have to be able to show them what bravery looks like. Everybody's courageous. Some people are just courageous 5 minutes longer. And we can all be brave, and we can show our kids how to be brave and how to stand up. But making sure that our kids are protected and making sure that we're the ones fighting the battles, these culture wars that our kids are caught in, they're not theirs to fight, they're ours.
I agree.
And that's very important to me, that we don't send our kids out into the world without knowing that they have a cover, and that cover should be us.
Well said. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us today. This is the Fire of Liberty show, where we bring to you the culture warriors from the front lines, our chapter chairs at Moms for Liberty. Nicole is from Placer County, California. She has been a warrior there for many, many years. She's been a chapter chair 4.5 years, basically, as long as Moms for Liberty has been around, and she continues to fight. So thank you for being part of our organization. Please join us every week, Wednesday, 10 a.m. live. You can catch us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, YouTube, Rumble, all social medias, Moms for Liberty. And go ahead and give us a follow, and give us 5 stars and a comment if you can. Until next week.